this video, as we continue to talk about the laws of wealth, and especially we talk about the laws of wealth in this section of the videos on the second X. And remember, we've actually been using, of course, the diagram we have for you of what we call the triple X factor. And we're talking about the laws of wealth that you must apply in order to be able to begin to build the second X in the way that we've taught it and explained it to you. So the first law that we want to pick up, or I would say the next law that we want to pick up with in this particular video, is the law of leverage. And so I want to really talk about leverage in the sense so you understand the importance of it in the context of building wealth. And so Archimedes said, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I can move the world. And so many of you probably have at some point in your life, you've probably used some kind of a crowbar or some kind of long lever to be able to get something moved or something done. And so what happens is simply a lever allows you to be able to move something much heavier, for example, than what you could do yourself. I remember several years ago, Becky and I were moving, talking about the law of leverage, and there were these two young men. They were both pretty thin and skinny, and they looked at a gun safe that I had. The reason I'm telling you they were kind of thin and skinny, they looked at a gun safe I had I needed moved, and this particular gun safe was quite heavy. If I remember right, it was probably 700 or maybe 800 pounds, at least 800 pounds by itself. And I remember they had these straps, and they actually it had two shoulder bands where the strap connected, and then the other one on the other side had the same thing. And then in the middle, there was this wide, real heavy fabric, like even like made out of the stuff like you'd tow a car with, but it was flat. And those guys were able to, with this strap is what I would call it, with this strap that went out, they were able to pick up that huge, heavy gun safe and literally take it and move it. And they actually moved it up some steps and I couldn't believe. And I said to them, how in the world can you carry all of that weight? How can you do that and be able to move that gun safe? And they told me a fascinating story. They said, it was two girls who went to MIT, right? Massachusetts Information Technology Institute, and they used some fancy trigonometry and calculus, and they calculated leverage, the law of leverage, and what it would take to be able to move heavy furniture was what they were trying to accomplish. Because they lived in an apartment, wanted to move to another apartment, but they had this heavy furniture and they didn't want to have to pay for movers to do it. And so they figured out, they went in and got their calculations going and figured out if they had a strap that was so long and it had a certain angle on it that even them as 120 pound or 110 pound ladies could actually move a couch, for example. And sure enough, they actually did it. Well, then they took this particular strap and started selling it to moving companies, and they did it because they realized that it actually worked. It was very effective. And when I saw those two guys move that heavy gun safe and actually go up some short stairs with it, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it just looking at it that could work that way. And so one of the reasons that I share that story with you is you don't realize, but with the law of leverage, you can move a whole lot more weight by yourself, for example, than you may realize or think that you can. And so one of the ways that we talk about the law of leverage in the light of where we are today is in the area of what we call good debt. And good debt, not bad debt, but good debt, and I'm going to illustrate this to you. It allows you to develop those green dots, that green line on the second X. Here's the picture here when we talk about it, we're talking about this particular right here. It allows you to, the law of leverage allows you to develop these quicker than you could do if you were doing it by yourself. And so what happens, it allows you to develop that passive income, and then it allows you to amplify. In other words, you're able to do much more for greater returns, and I'm going to kind of explain that to you so you see it. And so here's an example of what we mean by amplify, how this gets amplified. So if I was going to say to you, for example, that if I had $10,000, let's just take that as an example. I had $10,000 and I was going to invest the $10,000 in the stock market. So here's my $10,000. I'm putting it in the stock market. And let's say I was able to make so I make the investment. I have an asset worth $10,000. I get a 10% return. That's going to pay me $1,000. So I take $10,000. I buy $10,000 worth of stock. That gives me an asset worth $10,000. I get a 10% return. We're just supposing here. I get a 10% return on that $10,000 asset. I have made over, let's say, a period of 12 months, I have made $1,000. However, if I were to apply this same principle in real estate, I have $10,000, right, that I can invest in this illustration. But instead of buying $10,000 worth of stock, I'm able to actually buy an asset of $100,000. And people go, how can you do that? Because the $10,000 becomes the down payment on a much larger asset. In the stock market, you basically can take $10,000 and purchase $10,000 asset. But in real estate, you can actually take $10,000 and purchase a $100,000 asset. Now, if I come up here and I get a 10% return, that 10% is on the $100,000 asset. So if I make 10% that year on a $100,000 asset, my return is $10,000, which actually, if I had that $10,000 coming in, which is very possible if you bought the property right and you're renting it right, then that $10,000 actually becomes 100% cash on cash return. And most people say today, well, can you get 100% on your money? Absolutely, you can. Now, it takes more time, it takes more knowledge, and we're going to show you something on that here in a minute. But it takes other things that you have to invest in it, but you can amplify your returns, called the law of leverage. And I'm using the law of leverage to purchase a much bigger asset for a much smaller amount of money than I would up here. Now, I can do the same thing with a business. And normally in businesses, the way it works is a $10,000 investment usually would buy a $50,000 asset in business. You can buy a bigger asset typically in real estate. I'm not saying it's impossible. Sometimes you can, but in business, usually it's about this amount, this ratio. I take $10,000, I'm able to buy a $50,000 business, and if I get a 10% return, then that's $5,000 I made. So basically, I'm getting at least a 50% cash on cash return. So the point I'm wanting to see you here is when we talk about the law of leverage in this context, what we're really talking about here is your ability to be able to leverage with debt to be able to control more assets. Now, let me say this about leveraging with debt. There's been a phrase that's used like this: good debt, bad debt. Well, bad debt, just so we're clear, is when you actually borrow money to buy things that will always go down in value, right? So, for example, if I borrowed $10,000 and I decide to buy 3 flat screen TVs, the minute I walk out of the store, even with our ability to market it now on social media, those TVs more than likely are going to be reduced in half by 50% just when I walk out of the store, even with today's ability to be able to market them. And so what I'm showing you today is you've got to put it in assets that tend to go up in value, i.e. such as real estate. So there's other assets that I gave you the list earlier in one of the other videos. But in this case, we're actually leveraging what we call with debt. And what that means is that you can control more assets with much less money. And so when you start looking at this and start understanding what will happen in your life when you start using the law, for example, the law of leverage. But now let me give you one other illustration of the law of leverage. I'm sitting here in this studio, and I'm actually here on the campus of Charis Bible College, and I'm recording here in this studio, talking to you and teaching you. This is an example of the law of leverage. I can sit here, one person behind a table, and I can talk into a camera, and then this, what we're teaching you, this product that you're viewing, it actually goes out, and thousands of people are able to watch the teaching, because in this case, because of video and audio, right? Audio visual, I'm able to leverage my time and leverage what I do and talk to many more people than I could if I was just sitting down and talking to you one-on-one. But in this case, I'm able to take this specific amount of time, and through the camera, in this studio, I'm able to leverage my time and very candidly leverage my finances to be able to produce something that is able to reach many more people than I could just do one-on-one in my own life. And so there are many ways to apply the law of leverage in your life. And so that law of leverage is powerful. And when it comes to real estate, when Miss Becky and I first got started in real estate, one of the things that I had to learn was that it was okay to leverage. And one of the things that I learned, meaning to be able to borrow money on real estate. And also I learned that banks liked me. Banks liked me. If I walked in there and I didn't have any debt, I had let's say a decent credit score, but I'd never bought any real estate before, they're not going to ever count that toward me knowing what I'm doing. They have to see that you know what you're doing. And so what I learned was I began to be able to get in a place where I could buy a lot of properties, for example, at one time in one place. And I started using property managers. And over a period of time, my wealth escalated. I mean, the law of leverage allowed it to grow and to compound really in some seasons at an exponential rate because of the law of leverage. And here's where I'm going with that. The banks actually trust you more if you have proven that you're able to take money that's borrowed and turn it into more money and to pay that money back. They don't have a hard time lending to somebody like that who has been or may be in debt in regard to how they are applying it, because it takes a higher level of financial literacy and financial understanding to operate in the law of conversion and the law of leverage to be able to do that. And so they're not only believe in you and they have security on their loan, but they believe in you and your ability once they watch it to be able to make money. So the law of leverage is a powerful law, and don't be afraid of it as a Christian to use it in a positive way. So you've got to use the law of leverage. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but what about if it goes the wrong way? That's why you have to have a good understanding of financial literacy and learn to apply yourself. And if you'll learn that, you can be like those two skinny guys I saw moving that gun safe, or those 110, 120-pound ladies who were able to move their whole apartment just using the right strap, the right lever. And that's what we're talking about with the law of leverage. You're able to do a lot more than you could if you were just trying to do it all alone without the law of leverage. The second law I want to talk about in this particular video is what I call the law of acceleration. Now, this was something that I had to learn. Now, this law of acceleration is exactly the same principle that I talked about when I gave the illustration under the law of conversion of the farmer who said he wasn't going to buy his son a dirt bike. He was going to buy him a cow, and he ended up buying a pregnant cow, and he ended up paying $700 or $800. And they were able then to take the calf and fatten it up and be able to sell it. And with the same bag of money, they were able to now they have a cow and another calf, and a dirt bike, all with the same money. That's what we're talking about with the law of acceleration. So I'm teaching it here on the back end of the law of leverage because it requires, for the law of acceleration to work, it requires you to be able to apply the law of leverage. And I'll give you an example. So if I have $10,000, and I've been using that number through most of these illustrations, and I decide that I want to make my first purchase, for example, these are only examples, into a piece of real estate, and I make my first purchase, I take this $10,000 and I put it down on the real estate in order to be able to make my first purchase. And then, then I will take, once I've bought this property, get it rented, then 6 to 12 months later, I'm able to take that. Typically, I would be able to take that $10,000 back out of that first purchase through what we call a refinance loan, or in some cases, depending on how you classified that first purchase, you might be able to do it as what we call a home equity line of credit. Most of the time on investment properties, you can't do that, but I know people that have done this principle. They'll call this house their primary house, and then they'll refinance it, for example, while they're living in it, take the $10,000, begin to buy another house, and then they'll continue to change houses as they go, and they begin to build a real estate portfolio. I didn't do it that way by calling it an owner-occupant. I started with everything I did just as investment properties, and I was able to take it in my primary home, my residential home, the one I lived in as an owner. I was able to get a home equity line of credit, and I put it into my first purchase. But I did so well when I was purchasing, it made it easy for me to pull the equity out, usually in my case in 3 to 6 months. And I was able to pull it out and through a refi, and then I was able to actually buy my next property. Now I have this property and this property all with the same one bag of money. So in other words, it's the same 10,000 just moving through the assets and acquiring assets. So when I'm talking about the law of acceleration, it's a mindset that you develop to understand, how do I take the same amount of money? So let me say this to you, and this is very important to know. Anytime you and I go to the marketplace, we're talking about the law of acceleration, there's only 3 things we can really bring, or that we need to bring. The first one is money. So you got to be able to bring some money to be able to invest. The second one that you need to have is knowledge, right? So when we teach on the law of wisdom, which we've already done in this series, when we teach on that, if you don't have the knowledge, right? Solomon told us, with all you're getting, get wisdom. So you have to go get knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So you bring money, you bring knowledge, and the third thing you bring is time. So you have to bring time to the marketplace. In other words, if you don't have the time, for example, to take and to learn how to do this, and then the time to actually do it, then it's obviously impossible to do it. So here's what I want you to understand when I talk about the law of leverage and the law of acceleration. With money, knowledge, and time, you need to bring at least 2 of these to the marketplace. So if you don't have a lot of money or any money, that means you're going to have to bring knowledge and time. If you have money and you have plenty of money and you want to start applying it, you can usually hire somebody's knowledge. You do need to develop in your own, let me say, but you definitely can hire somebody else's time. So you have to bring at least 2 of the 3 of these to the marketplace. In other words, if you're going to invest and you're going to learn how to invest, law of leverage and the law of acceleration, you're going to need to bring at least 2 of these to the marketplace. So you're watching this video today to be able to gain knowledge. Then you have to look to see if you have the time. Some of you watching have the money, but you don't have the knowledge. So the point is, you've got to mix this up. And some of you can accelerate your ability with the law of leverage and the law of acceleration. You can accelerate your ability because you're coming with all 3. You're coming with money, knowledge, and time. And so you already have it. Some of you have money and you have time, but you don't have the knowledge. So you have to learn how to take the time to get those. And you could hire somebody with knowledge, but it's much safer if you learn that yourself. So in this video, we've talked about the law of leverage and the law of acceleration. And please, as a born-again believer, do not be afraid of the law of leverage, because it gives you the opportunity to move a mountain, as it were. When you just try to do it yourself without understanding leverage, it's not possible. And then you're able to really accelerate what you're doing by learning the law of acceleration, using the same bag of money to be able to accomplish what you feel like you need to accomplish. So I appreciate you watching this video today on the law of leverage and the law of acceleration, and I'll see you right back here on another video.